It's Monday, December 15th, 2008, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville. Produced and distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C., this is your NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about our show at our website, stash.normal.org, and continue the education and conversation on our blog as well. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. The podcasting and blogging technology for the NORML Daily Audio Stash is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. For your professional web design needs, visit redaphid.com. Hello, Stashers, and thanks for downloading the podcast. We're glad to have you here for another episode of the Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Been quite a busy weekend for me. I was part of the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards, the 7th annual, which took place here in Portland. It was quite a show. We were very, very happy to have Alan St. Pierre, the executive director of NORML, along there with us to enjoy the festivities. So we'll be having all sorts of reporting and audio and video coming up from that on the Stash blog, as well as on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/OregonNormal. Now, speaking of the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards, the executive director of Oregon NORML, Madeline Martinez, is going to join me on the Stash today to recap what happened at the awards this Saturday. And I've got another guest going back to a story we told last week about the High Times editor who was on the Fox News channel joking about Bill O'Reilly's stash and got censored. So David Bienenstock from High Times Magazine is here to tell us about how he was censored. I also hope you've been checking up on the Stash Pot quizzes that I've been posting up on the Stash blog. It's been really interesting getting the answers on some of these questions from the Stash listeners. I asked the question, in all the years I've been smoking marijuana, and then wanted to know what's happened to you, whether or not you've ever had a police encounter or not, and if you did, what happened? Well, the results were fascinating. 57% of you said you've never had a police encounter over pot. 18% of you said you did have a police encounter over pot, but they just confiscated it and then sent you on your way. 15% of the Stash listeners said, I've had a police encounter over pot and was arrested and paid a fine, while 8% of Stash listeners said they've had a police encounter over pot, was arrested, and served time. Those are those marijuana unicorns out there, I guess. And we did have 2% of the listeners who voted that they don't use marijuana. Might surprise some people, but some folks are actually interested in cannabis law reform who don't use cannabis at all. So check out our blog at stash.normal.org and look in the right sidebar for the Stash Pot quiz. I also post them along with some posts every now and then, so just watch the page and answer the polls as they come along. If you'd like to see the answers to all the previous polls, just go to stash.normal.org/polls archive, and you can find all of the polls in the Stash Pot quiz. Okay, folks, it's a big menu, so we better get right to it. Let's load up and get ready for your NORML Daily Audio Stash.
Hello, I'm Paul Stanford from the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation, or THCF. Medical marijuana is legal in 13 states today, and THCF has clinics in 8 of those states. Our doctors help qualified patients obtain an authorization for medical marijuana in their state. Patients are eligible for medical marijuana with a history of either severe chronic pain and or nausea, cancer, AIDS or HIV, hepatitis, glaucoma, seizure disorders like epilepsy, chronic muscle spasms such as multiple sclerosis or asthma, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, and gastrointestinal gastrointestinal disorders like IBS or Crohn's disease. If you or someone you know has one of these conditions, our doctors will help you obtain a permit for medical marijuana. THCF Medical Clinics has offices in Washington State, Oregon, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, Montana, and now Michigan. Call 1-800-723-0188 or go to the web at hemp.org or 1-800-723-0188.
Now it's time to take a look at the latest stories about marijuana from news organizations across America and around the world in our normal daily audio stash, Hemp Headlines. Pot reformers bang on Obama's doors for drug reform. From the Alternet. Change.gov, the website of President-elect Barack Obama's transition team, has now closed the web page open for questions. After receiving nearly 100,000 total votes on more than 10,000 public policy issues, the most widely voted on question for Obama is, will you consider legalizing marijuana so that the government can regulate it, tax it, put age limits on it, and create millions of new jobs and create a billion-dollar industry right here in the U.S.? Equally impressive, 16 of the top 50 overall questions posed to the new administration pertained to drug law reform. Now do we have your attention? So the number one question, 2 of the top 10, 6 of the top 20, and 16 of the top 50 all have to do with marijuana or drug law reform. Here's some of the questions that made the top 20, aside from the number 1 question, which we've already mentioned. The number 7 question asked, 13 states have compassionate use programs for medical marijuana, yet the federal government continues to prosecute sick and dying people. Isn't it time for the federal government to step out of the way and let doctors and families decide what is appropriate? Number 11 asks, the U.S. war on drugs wastes billions every year tracking down and incarcerating nonviolent users. What is your position on the legalization of marijuana? How do you feel about treating rather than imprisoning users of harder addictive drugs? The number 13 question, how will you fix the current war on drugs in America, and will there be any chance of decriminalizing marijuana? The number 15 question, what kind of progress can be expected on the decriminalization and legalization for medicinal purposes of marijuana, and will you reprioritize the war on drugs to reflect the need for drug treatment instead of incarceration? And the number 18 question in the top 20, the U.S. has the world's highest incarceration rate, largely due to the war on drugs. Our prisons are festering pits of rape, racism, and gang violence, and divert a lot of tax money to the corrupt prison industry. How can we fix this? So let's review. We are in a financial freefall, yet there are only 2 questions in the top 20 on the bailout and finance. We're engaged in 2 Middle Eastern wars, yet only 1 question on the military. George W. Bush's creative interpretations of the Constitution and Geneva Conventions only merited 2 questions, as did the environment, science, and infrastructure, if I count net neutrality as infrastructure. Meanwhile, medical marijuana specifically gets 2 questions, legalization of marijuana specifically gets 2 questions, and the war on drugs in general gets 2 questions as well. And yet, when I visited the Democratic Convention in Denver this August, Democrats talked about the war on drugs and marijuana as much as they praised the presidency of George W. Bush. Not at all. Pressed on the issue of his decrim stance from 2004, candidate Obama backed away from it, and President-elect Obama has been stocking his cabinet with some ardent drug warriors from the 1980s, 1990s, and today. Is Obama's cabinet a Nixon goes to China moment, as Alan St. Pierre put it this weekend? Maybe the change Obama promised will be a top-down rethinking of our drug policy, and staffing those positions with these nominees is a politically savvy way of guaranteeing their confirmation in the Senate and neutering any political attack on progressive drug law reform. For example, who better to tear down the injustice of mandatory minimum sentencing than a vice president who created them and can now say he was wrong? Or will the Obama administration ignore 30% of the top 20 questions from the people? Will we once again be the shouting majority, screaming for a common-sense approach to drugs and an end to the injustice and cruelty of the drug war, yelling our lungs out at deaf politicians who care more for campaign contributions from big pharma, alcohol, tobacco, construction, prison guard unions, and law enforcement than responding to the will of the people? I guess come January 20th, 2009, we'll begin to find out. New Jersey Senate Committee passes medical marijuana bill. The Senate Health, Human Services, and Senior Citizens Committee conducted a hearing and then voted favorably on the New Jersey Compassionate Use Medical Marijuana Act S-119 on Monday, December 15th in the State House Annex. 6 of the Senate committee members voted in favor of the bill and only 1 member voted against the bill. There were 2 abstentions. Nick Scutari, the original Senate sponsor of the bill, argued passionately for its approval. He said there was, quote, no price we would not pay, no limits we would not go, end quote, to protect our loved ones from suffering needlessly. He also quoted the National Academy of Sciences Institute of Medicine report when he said to those who argued that we should wait for FDA approval of marijuana, quote, there is little comfort in the promise of a better drug 10 years from now, end quote. To conduct clinical trials of medical marijuana has been ignored by the federal government. Many professional healthcare organizations have endorsed medical marijuana, and a number of them testified to this at the Senate Health Committee hearing. Dr. Dennis Petro explained how he conducted the first American study of marijuana's beneficial effects for multiple sclerosis patients that was published in 1981. Testimony was also heard from members of the Drug Policy Alliance and from supporters of the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey, Inc. A representative of Prairie Plant Systems was video-conferenced into the hearing to explain how medical marijuana was grown and distributed in Canada. The Committee for Medical Marijuana in New Jersey applauds the committee's vote as this represents significant progress in medical marijuana legislation in New Jersey. The bill now goes to the entire Senate for a vote, possibly as early as January 2009. The bill has yet to be voted on in the Assembly, but Governor Corzine has said that he would sign the bill when it gets to his desk. 13 states have laws that protect medical marijuana users, and now New Jersey is poised to become the 14th state to protect patients who use marijuana with a doctor's recommendation. For more information, contact Ken Wolski, Executive Director of the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey, at 844 Spruce Street, Trenton, New Jersey, 08648, or call 609-394-2137. We spoke with Ken on Friday about this hearing and were excited at the result. We will follow the New Jersey bill in the next year and hope that the Garden State becomes at least the 14th state to legalize medical use of cannabis. With Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, Kansas, North Carolina, Massachusetts, and even Idaho and Alabama considering medical marijuana in the next term, there may be a mad dash for that 14th spot. Stanford rolls to victory at Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards. From the Willamette Week's blog. Former Willamette Week cover boy Paul Stanford swept the annual Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards on Saturday night, winning the top 3 prizes for buds grown in his Felony Flats garden. Stanford, who runs a growing chain of medical marijuana clinics, took first place with his version of a strain known as Lemon Pledge, second with a strain called Trainwreck, and third with his Dynamite. He accepted his glass trophies in front of 100 people who attended the awards banquet at the Ambridge Event Center in Northeast Portland. Stanford also won an honorable mention for best flavor with his Green Lantern. Felony Flats is a local slur on a crime-besieged poor area of town. I can't see why there was any journalistic need to describe Stanford's neighborhood that way. Once again, within the first paragraph, we see medical cannabis juxtaposed with crime. Now, I met the reporter that evening and discussed my complaints of the pun headlines Willamette Week usually gives cannabis stories, like Working Spliffs, King Bong, Support for Marijuana High in Oregon. And he told me that is Willamette Week's style, sarcastic and irreverent. And to be fair, many other stories in the Willamette Week do get these snarky headlines. I believe the reporter to be reasonable and fair regarding this issue, so I can only assume that the Felony Flats description was an editorial choice, or that the reporter just doesn't see the crime bias in medical cannabis reporting, because it is so prevalent in all mass media. Felony Flats wasn't added for descriptive or contextual purposes. The location of Stanford's garden is irrelevant to the story. It couldn't have been chosen to add or reduce word count. East Portland Garden works just as well as Felony Flats Garden, and garden by itself would have sufficed. Otherwise, good article.
Marijuana is an addictive drug which produces in its users insanity, criminality, and death.
Marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind.
If the hideous monster Frankenstein came face to face with the monster of marijuana, he would drop dead from fright.
Reefer Madness.
Japan grappling with cannabis crisis. From the Mainichi Daily News.
From university students to sumo wrestlers, celebrities and professional sportsmen, the number of cannabis users is on the rise and showing no signs of slowing. Arrests and reports to prosecutors for marijuana cultivation have risen fourfold over the last 10 years to 192 in 2007, according to the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare's Compliance and Narcotics Division. Cannabis is also known as a gateway drug, since it can lead to the abuse of other substances. It's commonly misunderstood that there are no health risks with smoking cannabis. However, Yukihiro Shoyama, professor of pharmaceutical resources at Nagasaki International University, disagrees. Quote, "It's more carcinogenic than tobacco, so to say there's no health effect is a big mistake. Repeated use can also cause amotivational syndrome, similar to chronic lethargy and deterioration of memory." During 2007, police apprehended 2,373 suspects on 3,388 cannabis-related charges. Of those, 1,430 people were in their 20s, 184 aged 19 and below, and 75 aged 50 and above. The Cannabis Control Law provides for up to 5 years prison for possession and 7 for cultivation, but there is no formal punishment for use. However, the Health Ministry points out that there have been cases where smoking cannabis with a friend has been construed as joint possession, and that simple usage by no means allows people to escape the penalty.
What's the Japanese word for reefer madness? First of all, Professor Shoyama, cannabis has been shown to not lead to increases in head, neck, or lung cancers, even among heavy users, and may actually have anti-tumoral properties. Second, there is no such thing as the amotivational syndrome. Third, cannabis use does not lead to cognitive declines or memory declines and may actually stave off memory problems in old age. Fourth, cannabis is not a gateway drug, and no reputable scientist will even spout that nonsense anymore. Professor, if you need the links to the studies and the reporting, check out my post at the blog, stash.normal.org, where I've got hyperlinks to all this information and more. Hey there, Stashers. How would you like to win a 6-night trip to the most cannabis-friendly spot on Earth? That's right, a trip to Amsterdam for 4, sponsored by the NORML Foundation. It's an exciting new fundraiser for our organization, partnering with Win for Charity to help us raise money so we can provide programs and services to NORML members like you. Win for Charity is an online hosting solution for charitable organizations that allows us to harness the power of the internet to increase our fundraising ability. How do you win? Simple. Just go to www.winforcharity.com/normal. That's win4charity.com/NORML. Click your Buy Ticket Now button, then just select NORML as your charity. The vacation package includes 6 nights in an Amsterdam City hotel, including breakfast, entrance to the Rijksmuseum, and a canal bus day pass, round-trip airfare, private transfers from airport to hotel and hotel to airport, a full-day tour to Delft, The Hague, and Madurodam, and a full-day tour to the windmills and Volendam. Get your tickets now at winforcharity.com/normal. Your ticket helps to support our organization, and you could win 6 nights in Amsterdam. The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws is the largest grassroots drug law reform organization in America. So every Monday we visit with the activists in drug law reform who are fighting for our freedom. Get motivated to get it regulated. Join us in some political activism today. You can start by visiting NORML.org. Well, this weekend we had one of the final events in the cannabis community here in the Pacific Northwest with the 7th Annual Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards, which took place here in Portland, Oregon. Alan St. Pierre, the Executive Director of NORML, was there as our keynote speaker. And now joining me for a recap is the Executive Director of Oregon NORML, also a member of NORML's Board of Directors and the 2007 Pauline Sabin Award winner, Madeline Martinez. Madeline, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, Russ. It's good to be here.
So the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards took place this Saturday, and by all accounts, from what I've heard, it was a huge success from the people that talked to me about it. But maybe I'd get a little bit of your opinion on that. What do you think was the big hit of the, pardon the pun, of the Medical Cannabis Awards?
Well, actually, I think that our Sustainable Hemp Fashion Show was the biggest hit of the 7th Annual Oregon Medical Cannabis Award. It really stood out this year.
So what's that all about, Sustainable Fashion Show?
Well, we try to show sustainable fabrics, not only hemp, but also recycled wear. We like to look at all the different ways of being sustainable, and incorporating recycled clothes is a really big thing here in the Pacific Northwest.
So we got local designers that put together their fashions from hemp and, recycled clothes like recycled denim, or there was some other good stuff there too. Wasn't there some bamboo that was going on there?
There was some bamboo blends. And, yes, just some really interesting stuff. And as you mentioned, Oregon NORML had our own Oregon NORML wear, our recycled denim jackets with our logo on them, and our hemp T-shirts, along with our newest addition to it, our denim recycled jeans with our Oregon NORML logo going down the leg.
Yeah, it was a really fun show, and I think it really showed well how versatile some of these fashions are, and of course how trendy they can be. I especially liked having the models there giving a hemp fact. They would walk the catwalk, and then they'd step up to the mic and say some fact about hemp, like it's takes no pesticides, or 4 acres of trees to produce 1 acre of hemp, and so on. I thought that was a big highlight there.
Yes, that was the brilliant idea of our sustainable hemp fashion show coordinator, Anna Diaz, and it really worked out well. It gave everyone a really good education about hemp and sustainable fashion, with each of the models, as you said, reading one of the factoids.
Yeah, now while the Medical Cannabis Awards do recognize the best in medical cannabis growing here in the state of Oregon, it also stands to recognize the people that help to support and fight for medical marijuana rights here in the state. And every year, Oregon NORML grants the Dr. Rick Bayer Award. Why don't you tell our listeners a bit about Dr. Bayer and the award and who it was given to?
Well, Dr. Rick Bayer is known as the father of the OMA, which is the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act. He was the filing chief petitioner, and he was the person that Americans for Medical Rights came to from California to ask to be the chief petitioner. And he did an excellent job in Measure 67, as it was called, passed by 54.5% or 56% during the 1998 election. And Dr. Bayer, because he has always taken the hits and, really stood up for us under fire, just courage under fire and a real commitment as a steward of the law. We grant that award to different recipients. This last year was Representative Peter Buckley. The year before was the ACLU of Washington State as well as Oregon.
Now, Peter Buckley's in the state legislature there in Oregon, and what did he do to help protect medical marijuana?
Well, last year he actually stood up and really defended our rights when they came at us with a employee discrimination bill for all medical marijuana patients to be discriminated against at their workplace, which is really a sad and really a big discriminatory practice here in the state of Oregon at the legislature. Associated Oregon Industries, along with many of the pro-business supporting representatives, did introduce that legislation, and Representative Peter Buckley from Ashland was courageous enough to actually defend our rights by proposing impairment testing rather than urinalysis testing, which test for levels of metabolites rather than impairment.
And this was a big focus of the Medical Cannabis Awards this year. Madeline and I co-presented on this assault on OMA from Dan Harmon. This is something I've mentioned before here on the Daily Audio Stash, but Madeline, maybe you can tell folks a little bit more about what Dan Harmon's plans are here in the state of Oregon.
Well, Dan Harmon would really like to, as you say, assault the actual law itself by reducing the number of plants that you can have and making sure that you go through a regimen of trying Marinol and some other really a lot of people are concerned about these dangerous pharmaceuticals that are out there, such as Vicodin, OxyContin, and he wants you to go through all of those before you qualify for medical marijuana. And he would like to have medical marijuana patients actually lose their jobs if they test positive for THC metabolite.
That's just what we need in this economy, more people without jobs.
Exactly. That's a really big concern, and one of the things that you brought up that was really quite stark was that there are no real reasons for him to be assaulting our safety record, because there is not one incident of a work-related accident because of a medical marijuana patient. If nothing else, you demonstrated quite well with your excellent graphics, Russ, that if anything, work accidents have gone down since the inception of the OMA.
Yeah, it's something we'll be keeping our eye on here at the Stash and continue to report on it as the Oregon legislature convenes in January. Now, speaking of the medical marijuana law, that was another feature at the Medical Cannabis Awards, was the Cannabis Legal Panel, and that was headed by Oregon NORML's legal counsel, Paul Loney. Some great stuff learned there as well, I understand.
Yes, we had a presentation by the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program manager, Tawana Nichols, as well as Eugene attorney Brian Michaels, Attorney John Lucy from the NORML Legal Committee, and it was topped off by Dr. Sandra Camacho from the THC clinic to fill us in on what's going on there along the medical lines. But basically, we were finding out about the changes in the law that took place at the interim legislative session earlier this year, which was housekeeping Senate Bill 161.
Okay. And a lot of that information will be available on the Oregon NORML website at ornorml.org. And then, of course, the big feature of the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards, of course, is the awards themselves, where we recognize the top medical cannabis growers in the state. And Madeline, how does this differ then? Because I know a lot of people listening will understand of things like the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam or various testing sort of evaluations that happen around the country, either official or kind of unofficial. How does the Medical Cannabis Awards differ from something like a Cannabis Cup?
Well, the difference between the Cannabis Cup that takes place in Amsterdam and other evaluations is that most of them are done in one day, where you sample as many as 13 to 21 different varieties, whereas after the first three, you really can't tell the difference anymore. At least that's been my own experience. And the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards differs in that our judges who are patients registered with the program here actually have a month to evaluate all 27 strains by trying a strain every day, so they can get an accurate assessment of how it affects their particular symptoms.
And with 7 years of this testing under your belt now, you're getting a pretty good example or pretty good ideas of what strains are going to work best for which conditions, I imagine.
Exactly, for which symptoms of those conditions, because everyone seems to vary. And yes, we have been really lucky, and we found out which of the particular strains works best for lower back pain, which is Northern Lights number 5 we found years ago. And as the different strains evolve, it is really interesting to find out which of those strains works most effectively for the conditions. We found years ago that many people were growing strains that didn't work effectively for them, and that's what inspired us to create the OMCA.
And now, of course, the big news. Who was the big winner at the OMCAs this year?
Well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Paul Stanford from the THC Clinic and Gardens actually was our big winner in taking first, second, and third place.
Wow, and that's the first time that's ever happened where someone has taken more than one trophy home, let alone 3. 3
in history. This is the first time in the history of the OMCA, yes, that this has happened, and we're just overwhelmed with excitement and congratulations to Paul Stanford and his great crew, Andrew Hannegrud and Joe Jonings. They did an excellent job on this year's crop, apparently, at least according to all of our judges.
And the secret to the fine Oregon medical cannabis is tortoise poop, in case anyone is wondering. That's the secret ingredient, I guess, in the fertilizer.
Tortoise manure.
Tortoise.
I was pretty stunned when I found out that little factoid.
Tortoise
Very
manure.
Interesting. Amazing what you can do with your pet.
Yeah, I guess so. For everything there is a purpose, even tortoise poop.
Talk about recycling.
I guess so.
I think it's an excellent way to go.
Yes, it is. Well, the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards, big success. Check out the website at ornormal.org/OMCA. The results and all the data will be posted up there just as soon as it gets downloaded and processed. And Madeline Martinez is the Executive Director of Oregon NORML, joining us from Portland, Oregon. Thanks again for joining us on The Stash, Madeline.
Thank you so much, Russ.
Hello, Chicago!
Barack Obama has been elected the 44th President of the United States. But will he bring us, the cannabis community, the change we can believe in?
It's an issue of doctors prescribing medical marijuana. I think that should be appropriate.
NORML is asking you to take action and help us hold President-elect Obama to his word with our $10,000 pro-cannabis law reform ad contest.
When I was a kid, I inhaled frequently. That was the point.
Just make a 30 or 60-second video or flash animation that answers the question, what should President Obama do about pot? You can submit as many entries as you like, and winning videos will be featured on NORML's website and television campaigns.
What I'm not going to be doing is using Justice Department resources to try to circumvent state laws on this issue.
The grand prize is $3,500, so enter early and enter often.
Well, I would not punish doctors if it's prescribed. That may require some changes in federal law.
Contest deadline is January 15th, 2009. Check NORML.org for official contest rules.
The war on drugs has been a utter failure, and I think that we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
President Obama, we couldn't agree more. Here at the NORML Daily Audio Stash, we work hard to change our nation's marijuana laws through education and discussion. But we also take time to relax and unwind with an eclectic mix of pod-safe music from many independent artists. We look for music that speaks to the growing truth about cannabis, or music that speaks to broader themes of freedom, liberty, social justice, equality, and protest. To find out more about the artists and download the music you hear on this podcast, just log on to stash.normal.org. And if you'd like to get your music heard by the online cannabis community, just send us an email at stash@normal.org. G'day, Stashers. We got an extra special benefit for you today with our musical break all the way down from Down Under. Oh, I better stop that. This is a song called Marijuana Australiana, and it comes from a band down under called The Bushwhackers. I've also got the video for this up on the web at stash.normal.org, a rare video treat here for our musical break as well. They were one of Australia's hottest bands back in the 1980s, and they're still around, touring and performing and even composing with various different members today. That was about all I could find on them. I did get their history website on them, which we've got a link to at stash.normal.org, as well as a page with a link for some of their music. But that's about it. No MP3 download on this one, unfortunately. But this is the Bushwhackers and a song called Marijuana Australiana.
Have you heard the word about the herbs superb? You can take it from an ogre like me. Just take a toke for a bit of a joke and you're out of your coolabah tree. And the bloke next door, he wants to call the cops because you're smiling and looking happy. He should plant a few seeds and grow a few weeds and the world don't look so crappy. Talk about marijuana, Australiana, cheaper than booze, safer than pills, make you sing like Frank Sinatra. Marijuana, definitely top banana. It's the greatest craze since the Tivoli days. You can buy it from your nearest farmer. I was laying a rave in this cocky about changing some of our laws. I said, you know, they arrest us folks with grass and they lock us up indoors. He said, sir, it's you right for smoking them drugs. They lead you to the hardest stuff. But then I found he was growing a whole plantation, cause life on the land's a bit tough. Growing that marijuana, Australiana, cheaper than booze, safer than pills, make us sing like Norman Gunston. Marijuana, definitely top banana. It's the greatest craze since the Tivoli days. You can buy it from the nearest farmer. Well, I suppose some of you want to know where you'll load the other hand. Get a deal on good sticky hair. That's one place to tell every town. But there's one in every town. I bought a policeman's boot to get sticky hairs for $3,000 full of hash oil. Yes, folks, is from to go to Darwin, to the local on beach, yes, from Hobart to Darwin, Albury to Wodonga, Griffiths to Lebanese House, wherever the police helicopter peers into your backyard, even the dogs in the street, no, the drug squad, they have the beds, they pinch from the people they bust, and they'll sell you some for a bloody great profit, but you can't find one you can trust. And apart from that, all the doctors, they got to keep up the country's tax. So when the pills and the grog start to rot your old body, got a much better way to relax. Smoking that marijuana, Australiana, cheaper than booze, safer than pills, make us sing like Joan Sutherland. Marijuana, definitely top banana. It's the greatest craze since the Tivoli days. You can buy it from the nearest farmer. Smoke-a-reefer, 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 smoke-a-reefer. Now, I'm not saying you should smoke the old grass. It'll stuff up your lungs. And smoking, it makes you old and sick. Instead of healthy and young, have a bomb. Plant a few seeds, grow a few weeds, rip off a head or two, and boil up the billy. For a cup of herbal tea, you'll get the right point of view. Smoking that marijuana, Australiana, cheaper than booze, safer than pills, make us sing like, come on. I'm so pleased you love me. Marijuana, definitely top banana. It's the greatest craze since the Tivoli days. You can buy from your nearest farmer. Talk about marijuana, Australiana, cheaper than booze, safer than pills, make it sing like the birds in spring. Marijuana, definitely top banana. It's the greatest craze since the Tivoli days. You can buy from your nearest farmer. It's the greatest craze since the Tivoli days. You can buy from your nearest farmer.
Are you or is someone you know a marijuana smoker? Have you or is someone in your family been arrested for a marijuana violation? You need to know the truth about pot. NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, is the most comprehensive source of information regarding marijuana and its effects on health, as well as legal issues. NORML even offers a database of lawyers specializing in cannabis in your area. NORML, the nation's largest and most successful marijuana law reform organization, has spent decades gathering the knowledge and science on everything related to cannabis. NORML is the best resource to find out the truth about marijuana, connect with a lawyer in your area, or help find an end to prohibition. Information is available at NORML.org, that's NORML.org, or toll free at 888-67-NORML.
On Friday's Stash, I played a clip for you that appeared on the Fox News channel featuring High Times senior editor David Bienenstock, and I just thought I'd bring the man on himself to discuss what happened, and we'll tell you all about it. So, David Bienenstock from High Times, welcome to the Daily Audio Stash.
Oh, thanks a lot, Russ. I'm a big fan of the show, and obviously a big fan of NORML, too.
Well, we're big fans of High Times for sure, and of course, let's tell everyone that what brought you to the Fox News channel was the fact that you're promoting a new book, the High Times Pot Smoker's Handbook, featuring 420 things to do when you're stoned. What's the number one thing to do?
Funny you should ask. The number one thing is to, of course, join NORML, because I think, like I say, it feels great to smoke marijuana, as we all know, but it feels even better to protect all our rights and to help us all legalize it in the years to come.
Oh, that's excellent. All right. So on Tuesday night last week, you were on the Fox News channel, and I love the fact that you were on a show called Red Eye. I mean, could we get more stereotypical, huh?
Yeah, well, the show airs at 3 in the morning, so
gotcha.
Even on Fox News, nobody's looking to alienate pot smokers at 3 in the morning on TV.
So you get on there to discuss the book, and they're making the typical jokes they do whenever a cannabis consumer appears on the shows, especially on a show like Fox. And they were wondering if you were high for the interview, which they always ask that of us. And your response had to do with the green room, and that it was Bill O'Reilly's stash. What was that? The guy on the other end of the Fox News was saying that you had gotten into Bill O'Reilly's stash. Is that what you had heard?
Yeah, well, I made a joke that, I was just in the green room and Fox News has the best weed in the world, just kind of throwing it back at them a little bit. Yeah, they were pretty friendly guys, they weren't giving me a hard time, so I made that joke. And one of the regular hosts of the show, joking back, says, "Oh, Mr. Bill O'Reilly doesn't like it when you get into his private stash."
Right.
I thought was pretty funny. And but when I watched the show later, when it actually aired, they had bleeped out Bill O'Reilly's name. And I guess this was bleeping out their own host on their own show. So obviously we know they're a little bit afraid of the wrath of Bill O.
Yeah, and I'm wondering why they're so sensitive to it. Are they sensitive to it because they feel Bill does do it, or because he doesn't do it and he'd be mad that we said he did? Any guesses?
Oh, probably either way.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, this got picked up on Countdown with Keith Olbermann, and they made Fox News one of their worst persons of the world for bleeping the Bill O'Reilly name. Also, I've got a clip that I'll play here in a second from Bill O'Reilly's book on tape. A lot of people don't know that Bill O'Reilly wrote this novel, kind of a sexy thriller graphic kind of novel, and it's got all these scenes of doing drugs. And I got this great clip of Bill O'Reilly saying,
"Let's get out of here. I have some really good weed back at the hotel."
Now, let's get back to the book just a little bit here. High Times Pot Smoker's Handbook. I assume people can pick this up at hightimes.com?
Yeah, it's available at major bookstores, Barnes & Noble, and online at Amazon, and we're certainly selling it through hightimes.com. So it's widely, I can't say it's as widely available as marijuana, but it's definitely widely available.
Well, you won't get arrested for buying this, at least. That's good news there. Now, do you have any other media that you'll be doing in promotion for this book other than Fox News there?
Well, we have a review's going to be coming out in the Onion pretty soon. Either a review or a little story, and I've got some publicity stunts still up my sleeve, so we'll see what we come up with.
Okay, cool. And I imagine when we get to the summertime, we get to all the summer festivals, you'll be or somebody from High Times will be manning a booth with plenty of copies, I hope, so people can pick them up.
Oh yeah, for sure. I really have enjoyed getting to meet so many people and sign books and personalize all of them. I usually talk to the people and try to find their favorite thing out of the 420 things to do when you're stoned, and put it in the signing when I sell them the book. So that's been a lot of fun. The book also, it's got history, it's got cultivation, activism. There's a lot of information about NORML. in there, and a lot of other good activist groups. There's travel, there's culture, so you have the best songs and movies. So there's a little bit of everything. Like it says, it's a handbook. But even really seasoned heads, I think, will find something new and interesting.
Excellent. Now, these guys at Fox News that did the interview, you said they were pretty friendly guys. Did you get to meet them in person, or were you in one of those separate remote kind of places?
Well, I was in the Fox News studios,
okay.
But when we taped the interview, I was by myself in one room, and they were all in a room adjoining. But I met them after the show. You know, seemed like nice enough guys. Certainly happy to have something interesting to talk about.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think the subject now of talking about cannabis, you know, in the mainstream media is going to get a lot more play. We were just doing a story, Paul Armentano from NORML and I were doing a story on how Barack Obama's change.gov website asked people for questions about, you know, what he'd like to see in the next administration. And 6 out of the top 20 questions had to do with either ending the war on drugs or marijuana in some way. So, you know, getting you on Fox News is just one more step, to that direction, I think, of just breaking through the silence. I think that's the big thing that's going to happen in this next decade, don't you?
I think what we've experienced with the war on pot is a censorship of omission.
Yeah.
You know, this is a major issue. A lot of people feel very passionately about it. If you look at it rationally, it's certainly a two-sided issue, if not a one-sided issue towards legalization. And yet, it hasn't been seriously discussed. We had a 2-year-long presidential election where everything was discussed, up to haircuts and
yeah.
You know, and yet marijuana is something that's a daily part of life for so many people in America. Never came up, and in a way, that's a step in the right direction, because they certainly threw everything they could at Obama, real or imagined.
Yeah.
And yet they knew not to attack him as somebody who used to smoke pot, not only because of the hypocrisy, but because he might have turned that issue around on them and said, well, you know, it is time to rethink these laws because they haven't been working. So I agree with you. I think we're going to see, I think there's so many pressing concerns right now that it's going to take a little while to get around to it, but that we're ripe to re-examine our approach to marijuana.
Okay. Now, I had spoken to a few folks at High Times Magazine before, and one of they always said, you know, we asked the typical question of what are the questions that you get when you say you're from High Times Magazine, and one of the people I spoke to, I don't remember if it was Nico or someone else, but they'd asked about what's with all the fake pot ads. So, what's with all the fake pot ads? Who's growing that stuff and who's buying it? That's what I want to know, and why?
Oh, I don't know. You know who I'm gonna. I would say next time you talk to our ad director,
okay,
you should probably ask him that.
I sure will.
But I will say I am not a personal advocate of wizard smoke. I will give you that.
Or Tootie Puff or any of that, huh?
I'm not recommending wizard smoke.
Okay. Well, David Bienenstock is the senior editor from High Times Magazine, and the book is the official High Times Pot Smoker's Handbook, featuring 420 things to do when you're stoned. And I guess one of those things is to write the High Times official Pot Smoker's Handbook.
It's definitely in there somewhere.
Get your copy now. You can get it at Amazon.com, hightimes.com. We'll put a link to it at our blog at stash.normal.org. It makes an excellent Christmas gift or whatever holiday you wish to give gifts for. David, thanks for joining us, and good luck with the book sales.
Oh, thanks a lot. Great luck with the show. I'll be listening.
Thank you for downloading the NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. We are produced by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. Our executive producer is Alan St. Pierre. Our deputy director is Paul Armentano. Our webmaster is Brian Judy. And web production is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. As always, you can catch up on the latest information about marijuana at www.norml.org. And you can interact and download from our Audio Stash blog at stash.normal.org. For everyone here at NORML, I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, hoping all your harvests are bountiful and your encounters with law enforcement are non-existent. We leave you today with another one of our cannabis quotes, this one from Will Fulton, a marijuana grower, who said, quote, "True, the Founding Fathers had provided for a specific right to bear arms, but the only reason they'd nothing to say about the right to plant seeds was because it never would have occurred to them that any state might care to abridge that right. After all, they were writing on hemp paper." End quote. Yeah, it's important to remember that the first cannabis laws in this country were laws that required you to grow hemp for the colonies back in the 1600s. It's amazing how we've gone a whole 180 degrees on nature's most perfect plant and the roots of our very democracy, cannabis hemp. I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us for the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with more news and interviews you can use for the cannabis community. And until that time, take care of each other, tokers.